Hi everyone, this is Richard here from Marker. I'll just introduce myself first of all. So I look after some of the technology for Marker on the Marker websites. That's .com. And I said a little while ago on this group that I would do a little Facebook Live talking about some of the technology and the way in which the websites work, but maybe the way in which you may look to develop some technology for your own dog training business. So I hope everyone's there, or some people are there and they might be able to join in later and ask some questions if you wish to. The first thing I wanted to do was just mention a little bit about why I think it might be good to have a website if you're a dog trainer, rather than just having a Facebook page or an Instagram page. There's nothing wrong at all with Facebook pages and Facebook groups and Instagram and LinkedIn and all those things. But I think there are a few good reasons why it's good to have a website. The first one is that it's quite easy to communicate the website. So if you've got a website, then you can say to people, please visit Richard's website or, richarddogtraining.com website, and it's easy for people to find. And you can showcase your services and what you do, your sort of, your brand and the things that you believe in a way that's sometimes a little bit easier than what you might do on, say, something like Facebook. And the difficulty with Facebook, as many of you will know, is that it's basically chronological, and as you add more posts, so those old posts roll to the bottom. So if someone wanted to sort of see a bit more about what you've been doing or your services or where you live and contact details, it's sometimes more difficult for them to find them. So you can put on your services and your methods and your qualifications and perhaps links to anything. If you were, say, for example, a Marker Scholar, you could link back to the Train with Marker website and people could see your credentials and certificates and things like that. And you can also add in some testimonials of what people have said. Now, clearly you can do that on Facebook as well, but once again, that can sometimes run away and disappear. And you can put up some sort of stories and things, how you work with people and how you build trust with them. And you can talk about any venues you have and how to get there. And quite often when someone's sort of thinking, oh, I want to go and go to that puppy training class, for example, they might think, oh, I can't remember where it is. Well, the website's a quick way to get there. And perhaps you can even use an app to show Google directions and things like that. And really with the website, there's no reason why someone that has a small business website can't build in lots of different functionality. So you might want to book appointments through it and scheduling. You might want to put videos on there and tips and articles about how people can do dog training. And if you're doing other services like walking or residential care, then you could add all that information in there as well and let people book that. There's no doubt that you can do a lot of this on Facebook and LinkedIn and other places, but having a website in addition just means that you can gather the right information and get that right together. And it doesn't have to be particularly expensive. So we come on to what a domain is and how that works, but you can buy a domain for about £15 a year, and then obviously you need to then host it or buy some package in order to do that website. That's a little bit outside the scope of this live, but I will bring that on another technology live. And the additional thing that you can do sometimes when you have a website is you can look a little bit more authentic or a bit more permanent in what you do. So you can have your home address on there. You can have an email address, which would be, hello@richarddogtraining.com, and all those sort of things that make it sort of mean that you look at like a more permanent dog training organization. You can also use it to make sure you link to local things in your area. Some of you may have seen where Google will show local businesses as you search, whether it's via a map or if you do a Google search, it will show up local businesses on the Google feed, and that all sort of brings you to life and makes sure people can find you. And also you can put some pictures of yourself and your dogs, so people actually sort of think, oh, I know that person, or I may have met them before, and etc. So you can communicate that quite easily as well. If you meet someone, pop along to my website. It's called richardsdogtraining.com, and hopefully people will remember that and be able to search and look for it. So now just to move on, I've mentioned several times about a domain, and just to clarify, I hope this isn't to sort of, everyone might know this already, but a domain is basically, the address of the website. So I've mentioned the one richarddogtraining.com. That would be the domain, richardsdogtraining.com. And I want to run through that. This is often an area where people spend a lot of time, quite rightly, picking their domain, but also can sometimes make a mistake or something which isn't ideal for going forward, that they've picked a domain name and then find that it's not quite meeting their needs going forward. And I think that, we've all done this as well. And I think this is just some tips and views that I think might sort of help a little bit. So the first one is that it's good to try and include some relevant words in that domain that mean that when people see it, or when Google actually starts to index it within their search, that it sort of looks and feels quite good. So Richard's dog training, I'll come on to what the slight issue is with that one, but Richard's dog training looks good because it's a dog training website. Or if you were doing some other services like residential, you might do that. Now, that's all very good, but also you would probably need to make sure that it's good going into the future. It's sustainable going into the future, because if I was to get a domain, for example, which was richardsdogwalking.com, then if I then wanted to do other things like residential or dog training or whatever else it might be something not quite easy to think of at the moment. Because the word walking is in there, it could then limit how that website's viewed in the future and how that works together. So I think it's good at this point to always think about what you're doing now and what you might be doing in the future. Now, if you were just to say it's richardswebsite.com, that's fine, but obviously it doesn't look like the dog training one, and therefore if people are looking for it or searching, they might not immediately get to sort of think that's you. It's good to have a short domain name because one is, if someone's typing it in, that's good, but also if you're giving that to someone and saying, oh yes, please come and visit my website, I've got a booking form on there, or you can see all the testimonials, and it's called Richard's Dog Training, Bracknell-Berkshire.com, then one is it's quite a lot to type in, secondly it's quite a lot to remember, and third, it's very easy for someone to type in a mistake or spell, not get that spelling right. So keeping it short is best. And also if you're using the domain for an email, then if it's hello at a short name, that's better. And you'll probably know that most of the good short names, to be honest, have been sold and other people have got them. But you will find things that may work with you. And we've been working with some people in the marker community just recently to come up with some good domain names. And some of those have worked really well. We're using their name and some things which either relate directly to their dog training business or indirectly to their dog training. So it could be something about the way in which you train as well as just the activity. You should also avoid things like hyphens or dashes. Now, this used to be a bit of a trend in the past when people used to put in there some hyphens or something in there. So it was, there might be two. So there might be richards-dogtraining.com and also richardsdogtraining.com from someone else as well. That's not really a good idea to use hyphens. People don't like typing them in, and it looks also a bit old-fashioned now, and it's not quite such a good way to do it. I would also sort of avoid necessarily putting in a place name, like a geographical, because if I was to say Richard's Bracknell dog training, that's all sort of good, but there may be a time that you want to move or you want to expand or something else happens, which means that that's not quite so good as it was in the past. And we've probably seen companies that have done that. I know one, for example, a camera company that uses a city, but they actually sell those the camera companies in different parts of the UK now. So it looks a bit sort of doesn't quite work properly. Make sure when you pick your domain that you use the correct spelling. I would suggest you don't try and sort of be clever and try and change the spelling of a word in order to make it so that you can get the domain, because other ones might have gone, because people will not understand that spelling and may well type that in wrong. And that also comes to the fact that I would strongly advise you never to try and use somebody else's sort of trading name by misspelling it or changing it or making it look like something that it isn't. So you would, when you start to pick your domain and look for it, make sure that you have a good look and do lots of searches, because if you do pick up on somebody else's brand and name, they can ask you to remove that. They can actually take out some action to tell you, no, you mustn't use that. And my experience of that, when I worked for a utility, we had a very good name at the utility, big utility. I'll tell you what it was. It was N-Power, which is no longer really there now, but it was N-Power. And people thought they were quite clever by coming up with things like, instead of being N-P-O-W-E-R, they would then come up with an M, like an M for mother, or they would put M-Power, or they would spell power with an A on the end, and all sorts of things. And it was quite disingenuous. Some of it may have just been people trying to come up with their own domain that was catchy and good to have, but some people were doing it to be disingenuous. So it's always good to check those things and make sure that that the website is not being used for anyone else. And if you do come up with anything which is really someone else's brand, like for example the famous one is Virgin, you can't come up with Virgin dog training or Marks and Spencer's dog training, and you shouldn't really, to be honest, use anything that which sort of implies something that it isn't, like Great British Dog Training as well. Those things are frowned upon, and indeed that actually people may take action against you. But it's right to consider what your brand is, and if you can incorporate that brand into the domain name, that's all really good as well, whether that be your name or something else. But then it comes down to checking availability, because whatever domain you come up with, if that domain is not available for sale, and there's websites, I might put some down in the comments below after the live to say where you can check. If that domain is not available, then obviously you can't use it. Now, sometimes you can find one that's available by changing the letters on the end, .com, .co.uk, .dog, just .uk, .biz, all sorts of things. .com and .uk are the best well known and give the best trust. Certainly in the UK, .co.uk is absolutely fine, and so is .com. And it may be that if you do come up with a name that's not being used, then buy both, because then if someone does type it in wrong, you can redirect one to the other, and therefore you can make sure that you always get the traffic and you don't miss anything if it's an email or whether it's someone searching the website. But I would sort of suggest that it's not always good to have an ending on that which comes up with something which is a bit strange. Years ago, we had a website which was called walkaround.london. It seemed brilliant when we got it, but it didn't really rank very high in Google. People forgot it, and therefore it was actually quite hard to for people to find it and to use it, and it didn't really work very well. I think it was cleverer than perhaps what we thought it was going to be, and it didn't actually work that well. So those are there, and it's good to search. Now, you may find that you actually find a domain name which is one that's been used in the past by someone else, because business has gone out, have ceased trading, or they've just lost their domain name because they forgot to renew it. Now, if you do find one that looks like it's been used in the past, there's two things that you should just check, really. One is do lots of searches, and there's things you can do, and I can help you with if you need to, where you can search for backlinks. Now, sometimes if you pick something up that someone's used in the past and they no longer want it, and if they have used it and they're not using it, you can use it. It's great because you get extra traffic. So if there was one that said, Bracknell Dog Training Company, and it was not being used, then I might think, actually, that's quite good, because that might be linked in lots of places and indexes. The downside on that is that if that had a bad reputation, or if the actual domain was blacklisted, and there's ways to check that, then of course then that doesn't look good for you, and you actually might get bad traffic, or you might get people, when you try and link to them or send them an email, then the firewalls on the internet will immediately stop your email from going, because it say that's a blacklisted website. So I mentioned future-proofing it in terms of location walking. I think this is a really important thing, but you can change your website in the future and redirect. It's hard work sometimes, but it can be done. I would then say that if you've come up with something, try actually just saying it and asking people, your friends and family and whatever it might be, what they think of it. So you're not necessarily asking them what they think of it in terms of, the actual words, but sort of how does it ring? How does it work? How does it sort of come across to people? So I'm going to mention now what's wrong with Richard's dogtraining.com is the fact that really it should have an apostrophe in there. Now, you can't have apostrophes in domain names, as you probably know. Is that good? Does that still come across okay? Probably it does. And if it's richardsdogtraining.com, I think it's relatively easy to spell and people will be able to pick it up really, really quickly. If you try and use a sort of constructed word that's made up of other ones, I can't think of one at the moment, but if you were to use a constructed words, then what might happen is that people can't spell it, and therefore they can't also communicate it to other people. This is Lottie, by the way. They can't communicate it to anyone. So if they were to say, oh, you want to go to Richard's website, but they can't remember it's just called richardsdogtraining.com, then it becomes more difficult to pick that up. Then the other things I would just mention, just very at the end of this, is also think about, is that website domain name and the website they build, is that worth anything to other people? And the reason I mention that is that if you would have sort of a reasonably good generic website and at some point you wanted to sell your dog training business or you wanted to go into partnership with someone or whatever it might be, then that value of that can reflect in your business. And therefore, if it can be moved to somebody else or somebody else might want to use it, then that gives you a value. And if you were then to pass it on to somebody else, maybe it will be already good. Obviously, we know lots of companies do this. We know that Marks and Spencers was started off by two people, and obviously that's turned into other things. So whatever it is, you can use that. But it's good to think about your exit plan, even if it might be 30 or 40 years away, of how that value of that website might come in. It's a relatively minor point, but just something that's worth using. Now, I'm not really going to go into websites now and how to build websites. That might be if people want to hear for another day. But I would just say, if you're buying a domain, really it should be less than £15 a year. You register it in your name. I will put some links in there about websites you can use that, like stablepoint.com, which is one I use, and others. You can search, you can check, and then you can renew it. The company that you buy your domain from doesn't have to be the company where you host your website. What you do is you basically do a sort of forwarding redirect, which everyone knows how to do, and it can be very easily done, to go to a website wherever that website might be. So you don't need to do that. You may find that if you do buy hosting with someone, and as I say, we'll come on to that later, that sometimes they will give you a domain free. They're not sort of saying it's this one. What they're basically saying is they won't charge you for the domain in the first place. But please don't pay a lot of money for a domain name. If you see something that comes up, which is richardsdogtraining.com, and it comes up and it says, yes, you can buy this from GoDaddy and it's £2,500, I would suggest not to do that, really, because it's a lot of money, and without really knowing what the value of that domain is, you could be spending hundreds or thousands of pounds for something that may not actually give you any additional value over one that's already available. So that's it, really. Thank you very much for listening. If you've got any comments or thoughts, then please put those down below. And hopefully we'll do another one in the not too distant future. And if you want to hear more about sort of creating and hosting websites, then I'll do that. Thanks very much for watching and listening.